Friends, do you know why Hitler, who is considered the most tyrannical ruler of this century, hated the Jews so much, why he killed millions of them? And what it was that Hitler came to know about the Jews which made him want to wipe out their entire race from the world? Well, in today's video, I will tell you the brief history of Adolf Hitler and the Jews. And you will come to know that if the Yarkand people had not expelled them and Palestine had not given them refuge, then what is happening today in Gaza would have happened in Germany. So let us begin. Friends, who does not know Hitler? Adolf Hitler is such a name that from the 19th century until today has remained one of the most famous names in the world. After the First World War, what he did to the Jews was so horrifying that even today Jews tremble at his name. You will not believe that this man killed more than 6 million Jews, and not only that, but he killed them with such brutality that just hearing about it makes one's hair stand on end. The reason was that this man had an intense hatred for Jews. That is why he wanted to eliminate them completely from the world. Well, at that time people thought Hitler was a very cruel man who was the enemy of all humanity. But the truth is that he had no enmity with humanity itself. He was only and only the enemy of the Jews. That is why he wanted to erase the Jews from existence. But the real question is, why did Hitler have such hostility and hatred toward the Jews? And what was the reason that forced him to kill 6 million Jews for the world? Hitler is a very big murderer and tyrant. But if we look from Hitler's point of view, what he did to the Jews saved the German race. And when you hear his full story, you too will be forced to agree that Hitler's cruelty was wrong. But his viewpoint regarding the Jews was to a large extent correct. Well, this story began in 1914. 1914, Adolf Hitler was a soldier in Germany. He was never an ordinary soldier. He was indeed brave, but along with that also very smart. In July 1914, when the First World War began, Hitler fought the enemy with his army, and continued fighting for 4 years. Because he was a very sharp-minded man while fighting, he also kept observing all the activities happening around, and kept analyzing what was going on. Well, there were quite a lot of Jews in Germany's politics, and its army whose behavior seemed very suspicious to him. But when the war ended, his country had lost. Well, Hitler was deeply regretful that Germany had lost the war, but he was a man of very deep thought. That is why he could not digest the fact that despite so many soldiers and weapons his country had lost, he began investigating all the events that took place during the war. From the very beginning, he suspected the Jewish soldiers and many prominent figures in Germany. But when he carefully observed the conditions and events of the war, he discovered that these Jewish soldiers had betrayed Germany. It was because of them that the country lost the war. In reality, the Jews had started giving all the secrets of the German army to Russia. So whenever the German forces tried something new, Russia already knew their plans and always defeated them, to the extent that these traitors on Russia's instructions carried out poisonous gas attacks on German soldiers, killing many. They were so disloyal that the country that was feeding them and keeping them with it, they betrayed that very country and always tried to harm it. When Hitler discovered that these Jews in his army had stabbed them in the back, his blood boiled. He resolved that he would take revenge on the Jews. Well, he understood their evil and negative mindset, and he judged that Jews are a nation that backbites and betrays. And if they remained in Europe, then even the German race would be endangered. Hitler started warning his associates about them. He convinced people to such an extent that thousands stood up in his support. By 1933, when elections were held in Germany, people voted him into power as mayor of Germany. Well, as soon as Hitler became mayor, he gained immense power. He wanted at any cost to bring Jews under his control. He knew that if they were not controlled now, the time would come when these Jews would start ruling over them. But the problem was that the Jews were so cunning, spread all over Germany, and would not come under control. When Hitler saw that things were not working directly, he changed his method and resolved to uproot them entirely. In fact, he was such a hard-minded man that when he could not figure out how to get rid of them, he began building killing centers in Germany's cities especially for this purpose. In these killing centers, Jews were brought and either shot dead or locked in a room where poisonous gases were released, causing them a painful death. Afterward, their corpses were loaded onto trucks and dumped into forests. Gradually, not only did the number of killing centers in Germany increase, but also the number of Jews killed daily kept rising. These killing centers were also called death factories. Every day in these death factories, thousands of Jews were brought and killed. Hitler's hatred for Jews was to such an extent that if he had his way, he would not only erase them from Germany, but from the whole world. Within just 2 years, this man killed more than 6 million Jews. His men would capture every single Jew from all over Germany and bring them into these death factories where they were killed in extremely horrific ways. Hitler believed that if Jews were not exterminated, they would again betray and destroy the country. And his viewpoint was so strong that more than half the nation stood with him. Believe me, if this man had lived longer, perhaps not a single Jew would have remained in the whole world. But in the end he committed suicide and Hitler left this world. Even today many call him wrong. But technically speaking, his point of view was at least correct. Yes, he killed humanity to a great extent, and unlawfully murdered many. But just imagine if those Jews were still inside Germany, then what is happening to Gaza would perhaps have been happening in Berlin. Interestingly, Israel's president says that Hitler did not want to kill us. He did all this only on the instructions of Muslims. But now the whole world has come to know how big hypocrites and disloyal people they are. The country that shelters them they stab in the back of that very country. First they betrayed Germany, then they came to Palestine and became enemies of those who had given them refuge. Well, after Hitler, the Jews who survived were expelled from Europe like a fly from milk and thrown into Palestine. Surprisingly, these people had escaped from Germans as refugees and lived on Palestine's scraps. But then exactly what Hitler feared came true today. What they are doing to Muslims in Palestine, if they were in Germany, they would have done the same to Germans, because betrayal is in their nature. Honestly, this nation is so wretched that Allah sent many prophets to them, but except a few they rejected all of them. They have always died misguided, and will continue to die misguided. Now they have become so powerful that what is happening in Palestine the whole world sees. But no one dares to fight them, especially the Muslim countries remain silent and watch the game of death in Palestine, as if it is an ordinary matter. Honestly, better than 52 Islamic countries was that one Hitler who put them in their place. Today it has become clear that these people are the biggest traitors in the world. Wherever they go they plunder that land. Even now they have entered Al-Aqsa Mosque and crossed all limits. But despite that, all the Muslim countries sit idly thinking that maybe another Hitler will be born who will erase the Jews, and they themselves will not have to do anything anyway. What do you all have to say about this? Be sure to tell me in the comment box.